We should probably do at least one video for Pride Month, right? Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is my top 10 LGBTQIA+ characters that I have found in books. Now, one of these is a cheat in that I have just included the entire book, but you will have to wait until number 1 to get that knowledge into your brain. Before we jump into the list today, make sure you're checking the description box down below for links to my social media and Discord, should you want to come along for the ride. Now, personally, I've been part of the LGBTQIA+ community for about 15 years now, so just under half of my life, and I've hit a few of those acronyms, part of the acronym along the way, settling in trans and bisexual. So I have appreciated these characters being written about and being able to experience other stories within that community, so we're going to go through my top 10 today. Jumping right into it, at number 10 is Andon/Andy from the Greenbone Saga, written by Fonda Lee. Now, what I liked about Andon's character was that it was quite subtle, and there were some really beautiful conversations surrounding sexuality throughout what is quite a intense and dark series. Throughout the Greenbone Saga and Andon's sort of storyline and arc, we talk about the shame that can be felt behind sexuality, and that it can bring shame onto families. We also had these really beautiful conversations with Hilo and his other family members as we go through that series, that they don't really care, and it doesn't take away from Andon as a person. Andy has to come to his own terms and his own acceptance within himself as the story progresses throughout the trilogy, and I thought that was really well done and quite beautiful, and did spark some conversations with not only the person who is going through an exploration of sexuality themselves, but also friends and family who may be reading this book without the intention of learning something like that, but gets to take it away from the story anyway. At number 9, we have two characters from the Souls Aspect, written by Mark Holloway. This is a indie dark fantasy, but book 1 specifically, which is what I'm talking about, is very sort of light and character driven, and the characters' names are Brock and Thane. Brock and Thane have a beautiful friendship, and with our main protagonist Kellum in the story of the Souls Aspect, we get to see them sort of grow up with each other as they learn the magic of the aspect. It's sort of a magic school-esque story in the first book, where we are watching these boys become friends first, and the relationship between Brock and Thane is very subtle, almost to the point where you wouldn't know it was there until there are, again, some really lovely conversations that happen surrounding the couple. I had such a good time experiencing that relationship and those new butterflies that happen, and when you're trying to keep it secret from other people because you don't really know how they're going to react to a relationship which may not be conventional for that world. And I thought this was really well executed, and I absolutely loved it. Up at number 8 is Kyo Kaharan, and I hope I remembered and pronounced that name correctly. This is a character from The Ruptured Sky by Jessica A. McMinn, a book that I was lucky enough to read early this year. Kyo is a prince. There's no qualms about it. This is a very queer normative world where we haven't got people questioning why he's being with someone of the same sex, and it was just a really lovely thing to experience in this world. Kyo has no questions about himself. He's not forced to have those questions about himself, and I thought that the way that this was portrayed in such a normative way was really refreshing. And I know that we are seeing more queer normative stories, and they're honestly my favorite type of queer story, is just where it feels like this person is just a person who is living their life and happens to be attracted to the same sex. So I absolutely loved that aspect of the story, and I really liked the conversations around this character who is quite spoiled and is allowed to have things handed to him on a silver platter, but making deeper connections throughout the story, and some of those connections that have come from childhood, even though he's going about and doing things that he wants, is still very much connected to those relationships. And I thought that this, again, was executed really well. Something that you're going to hear a lot in this list. At number 7, we have Nan King. This is the first female on the list so far, and one that has been very important to me in my life when I thought that I was a lesbian many moons ago. Nan King is a character from Tipping the Velvet, and this is written by Sarah Waters. I would say that Sarah Waters writes mainly in a Victorian-esque prose and tends to have an underlying sapphic theme throughout the stories. These were very important to me when like I said, when I was identifying as a lesbian and I was just consuming queer fiction in the sapphic realm. Nan King stands out to me because in Tipping the Velvet, we go through 3 stages of life with Nan. We start off with a very new love. It's a new love. It's not the healthiest, I would say, tumultuous, if I pronounce that correctly. She really has to dig deep to let this love go because it isn't healthy for her, even though it was super exciting at the time, and then that eventually ends. The second part of the book, and one that would make more sense to me later in life, is the one that I identified with the most, and that is when Nan King pretends to be a Tom. Now, in this world, a Tom is a young boy who is basically cruising for older gentlemen and to give sexual favors for in exchange for money. Nan is found by an older woman who takes her in and likes the fact that Nan dresses up in all suits and is quite masculine in appearance, and then basically showcases Nan off. And again, this relationship, it was different, but it was also rather unhealthy, and there was a lot of drama that happened in the middle of that story. In the third part of the story, Nan King finds someone who is more nurturing, and she's not quite sure if this person is interested, but ends up giving it a go anyway, and it's quite a lovely progression of these types of loves that people can have in their lives. And I ended up relating quite a lot to Nan at the time that I read it, so this one was quite an important one for me. Coming up to number 6, we have Escara Helsine. This is from the War Eternal series by Rob J. Hayes. Escara isn't openly bisexual, that's not really discussed, but she does have relationships with both men and women throughout the course of the 5-book series. What I really liked about Escara's story is, again, it was quite normative. There wasn't this overarching questioning of why she was with one sex or another. It was just that Escara is with this person. There was a love between 2 females in this book, or in this series, I should say. It wasn't in one particular book, which was so beautifully explored, and also was one of the times where I got emotional at the outcome of that relationship. So that one definitely had an impact. And this was one of the first times that, since I started reading mainly indie, in the indie community, that I saw this sort of love being portrayed and just not questioned and accepted, and it was allowed to blossom, and I thought that was beautiful. And I just love Escara Helsine as a character. She's so unlikable, but you can't help but rooting for her, and there's no ifs and buts about her. She just is who she is. So I definitely enjoyed her and the relationships that were within that series. Up at number 5, we have another one which is close to my heart. This is Giselle and Khalidra from the Iron Crown. This is written by L.L. McRae, book 1 of the Dragon Spirit series, and I would presume this continues on with book 2, The Shadowgate, which came out earlier this year. Giselle and Khalidra remind me very much of my own relationship. We have one person who's a little bit schizzy, a little bit ADHD, and just doesn't retain a whole lot of information, and then we have Khalidra, who is basically a hard ass and likes rules, which is me, if you're wondering, in this side of the relationship. I can see my wife down the end here giving me eyes about what I'm saying. She's the one with the inability to remember anything, so I'm getting daggers. But this relationship was so damn beautiful in this book. What I loved about it was established from the get-go. There was none of the the getting to meet you, the lust that comes with a new relationship, it was established and they were very much in love, and we were allowed to see that love 7 years on from the beginning of what had happened here. They were such a great couple dynamic, and it may be one of my favorites that I have ever read in my time. We'll see when I do this list next year if I do it again. But they definitely stand out to me as just a beautiful couple who has each other's best interest at heart. They would get annoyed at each other, but then they would remember something they loved about them, and that just reminds me so much of my own relationship, when you get annoyed at little things, but then you remember, like, the divot of my wife's nose always gets me because it's one of my favorite parts on her body, and like that's just enough to put a smile on my face. And I remembered, it just made me feel very nostalgic for my own relationship. Next up at number 4, we're getting into characters that hold a lot of meaning to me now. This is Alarin from the Tired Child trilogy. Now, it is not specified whether Alarin is non-binary. I certainly read them that way. They could also be known as gender non-conforming and did not go by a pronoun. They were known as they, them throughout the entire series. Alarin was such a vital part of this series, and probably one of the reasons that this series is on my favorites of all time. We really got to see them grow. They were a very small part in the first book. So they are the Corsair for the ships. If you don't know, the Tired Child trilogy is a nautical fantasy where we are essentially on a boat of the dead, or boat of the damned, I should say. These people have been damned to life on the seas, and that's where they will die, and Alarin is the Corsair on this ship. They are portrayed in a very small way in the first book, and then as books 2 and 3 go on in the trilogy, their part becomes larger. And what I loved about this is we got to see how much respect our other crew members, who didn't necessarily understand the ins and outs of Alarin's life, got to know them as a person and just put so much faith and stock in this person, regardless of what they were portraying out into the world. Again, there was no questions asked. This is a ship of the damned. People were there for a reason, and they just treated Alarin like a person. We did get some insight into Alarin's past as the stories went on. Again, I thought that was executed quite beautifully. I do love the way R.J. Barker writes, so I may be a little bit biased in that, but I just thought that this was such a respectful way to portray a non-binary or gender non-conforming character, and I would read it again just to experience Alarin again as a character, and the amount of growth that this person went through, being quite shy and not wanting anything to do with anyone, just wanted to make maps and like hand them to people and say, here you go, this is your map, this is where we're going, to actively having conversations and opening up about their life. And I thought that was so beautiful as a reader to experience. Moving on to number 3 is the first time that I ever saw a bisexual male be open about it in a book, and this is Jesper from Dreams of the Dying by Nicholas Lietzow. Jesper was an eye-opener to me, coming into really starting to understand my own sexuality and my own journey with being okay with being attracted to men. As a man, for me personally, it did not make sense for me to be attracted to men as a woman, and then it started clicking way more once I transitioned, and then being okay with having that attraction. And to see that portrayed on the page as someone who was very openly attracted to males and females, there was no mention of non-binary characters in this particular book, was so refreshing to me. And I could just sit back and go, oh, I'm allowed to be attracted to men and women. It doesn't matter. So that was quite eye-opening. It was quite impactful for me, and I think again it was done in a way where, even though Jesper wasn't quite open with sharing in the beginning of the book his sexuality, it was part of him, and he didn't feel the need to openly talk to people about it. He would just sleep with both men and women, and we got to experience both types of relationships as we went through the book. Number 2 is the character that I have related to the most out of any queer character I have ever read, and that is Evermere, and this was in A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland. Evermere is a rule follower, He does not like to draw outside the box. He's very strict, self-disciplined, and he doesn't want a bar of anything out of the ordinary or anything that puts a spanner in his works for the day. He definitely likes plans, and he does not like characters who come into his life and just put a ray of sunshine in there, because it makes him question everything that he has ever known. And I related to that so hard. I think my life would be very different if my wife had not come into it at the time that she did, because I was definitely on a path of only being able to do things that were set on a list, or only my wife is pointing to her bum and it says there's a stick up there. So yes, Evermere does have a stick up his bum. I also have a stick up my bum. Yeah, she's nodding. I haven't quite got rid of it yet, apparently, but I feel like I'm a lot better. Okay, we've got a nod. I'm a lot better. So Evermere, to me, did not... the sexuality in this book was not really discussed. The main character, who I forgot his name, the prince character, who's quite spoiled, fairly effeminate, there was no question about the sexuality for him. And with Evermere, I think this is quite a sexually open book, to be honest. It was, again, queer normative. People were just allowed to be with whoever they wanted to be, whether they be... There was non-binary characters in this book as well. I believe the author is non-binary themselves, and it was very just normative in here. But Evermere wasn't really sure what the attraction was when he began, and he ended up... The journey for him to fall in love with the person was really beautiful. So his journey throughout the entire book, you just see, for lack of a better term, that stick coming out a little bit and allowing himself to fall in love with someone who was completely different from him. This is a very, very, very slow burn romance, but it was quite impactful for me personally as I read it. And beautiful prose. If you do like beautiful prose and a slow burn, then this is a great book to pick up. And number one, like I said, I cheated a little bit and I have put an entire book here, and this is because it was a sexual awakening for not only the characters, but for me, again, reading it as I was coming to terms with being attracted to men as well, and questioning my sexuality going forward. And it was just a book that went, you know what, who cares? Go and have fun. And that is Zeke the Rising by Naomi King. Naomi King is an absolute powerhouse of a human being. If you have not checked them out before, then I highly, highly recommend it. They have just done their own audiobook for Zeke the Rising, so hopefully that will be available soon. But this book had a cast of characters who just was so sexually open, and there was no ifs or buts about attraction. It was a very vivid and open world, and the conversations around sexuality were plentiful and beautiful. Even though they weren't directly being talked about on the page, it was definitely there as to be who attracted to who you're attracted to. It doesn't matter. You don't have to label anything. Just go and have fun with your life. Within reason, be safe. There were characters from all walks of life in this book, and I just had such a good time with it. If anyone is sort of questioning or in that space of life where you just want to consume more of those stories while consuming a fun, action-packed fantasy romp, then I would absolutely be pushing people towards Zeke the Rising. It is super underrated, in my opinion. So that is a book rife with LGBTQIA plus characters, and that's why it's got the number one spot, because there's way more than one in there across the entirety of the book. My top 10, or top 10 couples, people, books, whatever, in the LGBTQIA plus community. Let me know who your favorites are in the comments down below. I know personally I haven't read as many of these characters as I would like, and I'm definitely looking to rectify that in the coming years. I'm trying to be more conscious of having these types of characters in the books I read and sort of putting them in there. So if you do have recommendations, also let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. Happy Pride, everyone in the LGBTQIA plus community, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.